Our northern neighbors are known for their polite demeanor, cold weather, and of course, delicious maple syrup. But on the racing side, they have a reputation for their brutally unforgiving circuits. Canadian Tire Motorsports Park won't go easy on anyone, so get ready for the PCA Sim Racing Series 13 Club Class. You'll see it all live here on RaceSpot TV. Hi, I'm Joe Peak, and with me in the booth tonight is Roush Racing driver Joey Atterbury. Behind the scenes is our director, Ramiro Cisneros. We're thrilled to have Princess Cruises as the 2025 PCA title sponsor. As the official cruise vacation partner of Series 13, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 16 elegant ships, sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA Concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 833-679-2188. PCA is also proud to announce they are celebrating their 70th anniversary in 2025. Here's to many more decades with North America's largest Porsche enthusiast group. Well, Joey, we are now into the third event of the season here at Mosport, and here we see kind of what's in store for the progress of our schedule.
Like you said, round 3 here at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. The drivers have already hit that Daytona road course as well as Portimao Algarve, as it's known there back in January. And then we're going to hop across the pond once again over to Silverstone once we're done here in North America. You're going to be getting those jet miles, too, back over to North America for Road America, the Hungaroring, and, of course, Imola there as round number 7 this season.
So let's take a glance as well at our championship. And it is Andy Jenks up at the top over Julian Velez. Now, they do have a drop week in here, but because Jenks has won both races, well, he has a lock hold on that top spot instead of a tie like we would see with the pros earlier. But there are still some ties down below, as many drivers have finished in various positions apart from one another. So that's why you see so many so close. It'll start to separate as it goes on. Here we have the Clean Driver Award, and impressively, we have 3 different drivers in the first 2 races who have not had a single incident. That is really an amazing achievement, although I believe last season we had at least one driver with complete 0 across the board. Patrick Adamczyk and Mike Madsen only on a single one, Green and Gibson on 2, and then you've got Boyer, Gregory, and Cottle only on 3 incidents. Clearly a lot of drivers that are taking quite good care out on the track itself. But let's introduce the audience, Joey, to our track. Why don't you talk us about Mosport a little bit?
Yeah, Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, or like you said it shortly, Mosport is really what it's known as. 2.45 miles in length, just a tick under 4 kilometers if you're going by that measurement, and 10 turns that are incredibly fast. Elevation is abundant through here, and I mentioned how fast it is. Turns 1, 2, 3, and 4, incredibly fast. It's more of just a lift off of the throttle to set the nose, and then right back to it to commit yourself to drive through these corners. You got to watch out for Moss Corner down there, kind of in between 5A and 5B. That inside apex curb at 5B can definitely jump out at you, and then careful of that exit curb on driver's left as you're trying to shoot down that Mario Andretti straightaway, which is anything but straight. And then turn number 8, incredibly fast off of that back straightaway, but it is a passing opportunity, especially if you've used that slipstream to get that top speed right up alongside your competitor. And then what I call is probably the 2 most technical turns here on this racetrack, turns 9 and 10, always good for a late lunge on the last lap.
Already well into qualifying, with these laps only being about 1:15 for our quickest drivers. Most have either 2 or all 3 of their laps done at this stage. But because it is such a short lap, and like you said, only 10 corners, Joey, not many places that you can make a difference out here.
It's going to be incredibly close times. That's usually what you get when these tracks are so kind of short in nature. I see pole timer right now, at least provisionally, a 1:15.599. And kind of to your point, you see second and third right there, only separated by about 0.05 of a second apiece.
It is tight up at the top, which is a good sign that we'll get another close race like we had with the Pro Class for the win. Although last night we did see that it was a bit difficult to pass for those top 2 cars. Although fuel saving, shockingly, came into effect on this one. Not a track that I expected you could make a big difference, but it wound up gifting the win to the driver who ran in second place for much of the last race. I wonder if they've been taking notes on that, Joey, to maybe use a little bit of that.
Yeah, we might see it out here today at Mosport. We'll just kind of have to wait and see. Remember, it is that 60-minute race we're going to be doing. So all these drivers, even though they're kind of in that qualifying mode right now where you're trying to drive the car at, call it 11 tenths, you do have to kind of shift that focus and focus more towards that 60-minute race. But as of right now, it's just go out there and see how fast you can actually get this thing.
Michael Schultz is only as quick as 15.8. So he's done all 3 of his laps, so he's just practicing at this stage. But with this being a bit of a dangerous track, he's probably used to that. Apparently, he was a former pro motorcycle racer. That is, I mean, I know car racing is dangerous, but motorcycle racers have my respect because that takes some serious cuts.
Yeah, I want to agree with you on that one, especially if it's motocross. I like my collarbones, my shoulders, my legs. I would prefer to keep them intact. I will say, though, after being on the racetrack, the road racetrack a lot, I never thought about driving a motorcycle on the street per se, Joe. On the racetrack, a pavement racetrack, I would be interested.
Yeah, I mean, in a closed environment, but I can imagine it's probably scary. Well, as you can tell, it's a bit hazy out for today's race. Very overcast, and as such, we got very cool track conditions, 19 Celsius, which is about 66 Fahrenheit for those in freedom units over here. And our drivers will have to try and work to get those tires up to temperature, which should be easy with a lot of long corners.
And I think when I see that those temperatures are kind of more on the mild side, it just means more grip for the drivers to go out there. You mentioned the cold tires. Yeah, you do got to get them warmed up, but once they're there, it should be a fast racetrack.
All right, looks like with everybody having their laps in, we don't have to wait for the full 10 minutes. So the grid is set, and Michael McKinney has put himself on pole position. John Gibson starts second today, followed by Derek Dirksen on the inside of that second row, then Ben Leung starting in fourth. Ken Eskridge all the way up in fifth place at the start here will be flanked by David Glenn on the outside of row 3. From there, we've got Julian Velez starting in 7th and Peter Sigourney in 8th. Mark Foley starting 9th and Michael Schultz, who we covered earlier, good enough for a top 10 today. And then we've got Mark Rondeau starting in 11th, Joey, and Dale Green rounding out our first 12.
Yeah, and then over here in 13th, we've got Kellen Humbuker in the number 14 car. Terrence Tong is going to be starting in 14th. Peter Kummer in 15th. Patrick Adamczyk is going to be starting from the 16th position in that number 407. Mark Dorn is going to be starting in 17th with Rex Jarwala in 18th here. Across the page into 19th is Scott Bowers in that 917 car. Richard Woodruff is going to be starting from 20th with Gary Rice in 21st. Steve Komatz in 22nd, Charlie Boyer 23rd, and David Snelling back here in 24th.
Last of the field sees Robert Cottle in 25th position, followed by Robert Neville in 26th. Then it's Jake Steinbreek, as Chris Sherburne will be the last driver to be able to set a time. Mike Matson unable to put one in here for qualifying of our 29 starters. We'll see if he actually lines up on the grid, as he is not showing up on our graphics here. So not sure if he'll find his way out and start from the back to see what he can do from there at a track where passing can frankly be a little bit tough, Joey.
It can be. With such a high-speed racetrack, there's only one big-time braking zone into Moss Corner. So, yeah, it can limit the passing opportunities. But with that said, it is a high-speed racetrack. If you can go out there and be right on the bumper your competitor that's directly in front of you, you might be able to just force them into a mistake, and that's the easiest pass you can make.
Indeed. And with the pit stops in this one, cars are going to get quite light towards the end of the race. And, you know, we were discussing it, Joey. These Porsches are kind of unique cars as we watch on board with our full lap. Actually, we'll get to that point in a bit. Why don't you talk us through with Michael McKinney here?
Yeah, Diving off here with our pole lap with that number 527. You see how fast turn number 1 is already, and trust me, turn number 2 is no slower. Just a dab off of the throttle there. You see him stick it into 5th gear throughout the entirety of the corner. You do have to jump on the brakes right here for turn number 3. Little bit of an overcrest with some bumps right there at apex, so it can make rolling onto the throttle a little bit tricky. And then let's see if there's any sort of maintenance throttle as we charge down the hill here. No, it sounds like Michael is just flat to the floor using the grip out of this Porsche GT3 machine. Got to woe it all the way down to 2nd gear there for Moss Corner, and that exit is probably the most important corner on this racetrack. As you see, it launches you out onto this Mario Andretti straightaway where you're going to go up 2nd, 3rd, 4th through 5th gear, all the way up to the top gear here in these Porsches. There's 6th, and then it is just going to be a very, very light breathe off of the gas, modulate that brake pedal and those revs down to 5th, another downshift down here, 4th to 3rd, and then through this final corner, which can be so tricky. Make sure to keep it on the racetrack on driver's exit, and that's your pole lap with the 527.
Nicely done. And back to the point that I was talking about, these cars and the way that they get rid of fuel. We were kind of musing, you and I, about how the handling changes over the course of the race, because these are not your typical car with all the fuel going in the front and all that weight on the back.
Yeah, well, yes, the weight is, with the engine in the back there, and I think that Porsche's done such a terrific job with the balance, right? They've really tried to shove everything in between the axles with all of these newer cars, and so I think, yeah, we'll have a little bit of, call it balance shift as the fuel does burn off, but I think that if the drivers have done their practice laps, right, they should know just kind of the general trends of the car and say, okay, the first handful of laps, the first 4 or 5 laps, this is that tire warm-up phase, and this is the characteristic of the car, and then get into what I call the meat and potatoes, really call it 60-70% of what you're going to be driving on, and then that last 20%, 15% is when the thing is all the way light, and you should know that it's kind of familiar. That's kind of like a qualifying setup. You just have to manage that tire wear for the first, call it 80% of the race.
Yes, indeed. And yeah, the tire wear was another aspect that we wound up having to talk about as they were abusing the tires. Some of the drivers seem to do a little bit better with it than others. Terrence Tong here, about 2nd position in the warm-up, and coming to a little bit of a halt for a brief moment there on the backstretch. Maybe happy with what he's got, because they're going to be gritting up here very shortly before they get on their way as the 172 David Glenn pushing the limits there on the exit of turn 1.
You have to. I mentioned how fast this place is, and if you're not using every millimeter of the racetrack, you are leaving potential mile an hour out there on each one of these straightaways. I really like getting kind of an inside look inside each one of these sim rigs out here. See lots of triple monitors. This looks like an ultra-wide monitor here that Michael Schultz is using. Always one of my favorites to use.
Absolutely. So, clock ticks down to 0. We're ready to go racing for the club class. Event number 3 for these drivers. We're getting into a seriouser part of the season where what points you have scored really kind of puts you in the position on, are you on the back foot? Or are you trying to play defense from here and hold back some of the hard chargers? So far, it's been dominated by Andy Jenks, but Andy Jenks is not here today to try and defend in the club class. So who is going to pick up the torch for him as we go racing here in Canada? Rolling start as they traditionally have for this series, but there is an important rule to remember. If you don't see them weaving, that's because they are not allowed to do that to try and warm up the tires. So it's all going to be in either dragging the brakes or how you can condition them in those first few corners.
And really, I don't think that there's a huge performance advantage to be gained. I think that's a great rule just to kind of minimize any potential accidents that can happen between weaving across half of the lap out here, making sure you're respectful to everybody else out there on the playground. Another point about this start, about this rolling start here, remember, those leaders are going to be getting the green pretty much directly out of that final corner. Everybody else is still going to be stacked up through 9 and 10. You're going to have to kind of find your way through it as you approach the green flag.
Yeah, it's going to be tricky, no doubt, getting on the throttle, not spinning it up too much. as we're getting a little bit of sun, but it's still not fully clear out above. As you can see, the sun just about peeking through a lot of the dark clouds that we've had. Thankfully, there is no rain that's going to be during this race. So you don't have to worry about that, but still, tire temperatures could be a talking point as they come up and across the exit, the end here of the Mario Andretti Straight down into turn 8. We also saw a few drivers try to pull that almost signature move this track here, Joey, of going around the outside of the entry to the Essence.
You can definitely do that. If you've got the confidence level and the aero grip level with the downforce, you can definitely push your limit around the outside of that turn number 8. And if you can get up to the axle, it provides you the inside at 9.
All right, who can pull off that one as the green flag is out and Michael McKinney has control of the field, but he does not get a good start. John Gibson around the outside could swoop down across him. No, he does not. They're almost making contact. Very close coming through the first apex. Gibson holds on to the lead.
McKinney almost got into that back bumper. Like you said, Gibson was able to snag away that lead, and now down the hill, looks like we've got multiple cars off. That's chaos in the middle of 2.
Oh, one is going up and over, in fact. It is a massive wreck here. Very high contrast to the start of last race where only one car went off down through Clayton. So that is going to be a dire start for a number of drivers. We've already lost a couple of them as Gibson leads McKinney up through the Moss hairpin.
And that was a huge accident back there in turn number 2, but Gibson's doing exactly what he needs to do right now, and that is try to run as fast as he can, run away from Michael McKinney, who was your pole sitter. You see him sitting right there in that slipstream, and then maybe call it a 3 to 4 car length gap, and I think I see David Glenn might have had a heavy incident on the back straightaway.
It was in the wall there, and it looks like he's had to take a tow, so not sure what put him there. Like you said, it does weave back and forth. I wonder if there was a miscommunication as the first lap's going to be led by our second-place starter, John Gibson. And again, this is very similar to what we saw with a pass at the first lap in the Pro class. So I wonder if Gibson took a little bit of a page out of their book.
And I want to go back and talk about that point that you had already mentioned about how difficult it can be to pass here at Mosport. So if John Gibson got that pass done even before turn number 1, which we saw him on that initial green flag, he might have made that difficult pass. Here's that replay of that first lap incident in turn number 2. You see several cars off drivers, right, and then they come back across the racetrack, and one of them up on its lid.
Oof, yeah, from what I can tell, Glenn, Doran, Snelling, all involved. I believe Robert Neville as well may have gotten a piece of that. Looks like we do have a black flag. I wonder if it's related to the incident. Patrick Adamczyk in the number 407 for violation in the orange zone. Those who are not familiar, orange zone is basically a set of corners at the opening lap where you're penalized extra harshly if you cause an accident or grieve a rule. So Patrick is going to get a little bit of extra pain. Here's David Snelling, who I think is the one that went up and over.
Yeah, he was. Oh, there's that heavy impact. I mean, David had nowhere to go on the inside of the racetrack. All of a sudden, he had a Porsche pretty much cutting across that pavement right into his lap, and we saw the consequence from that. But I got to give credit to John Gibson right now because he's actually starting to pull it out over Michael McKinney. Ben Lung there in second place is starting to feel the pressure, and in fact, there goes Dirksen trying to take that spot away.
Wow, into Quebec. I've seen passes into there, but it's difficult to pull off, and he sliced up the inside. That's going to get him into a podium position with that move.
See Peter Sigourney here in the 222 does the smart thing. That's what I was waiting for right there. You saw him parked perpendicular on the exit of the racetrack, but instead of pulling into the racing line, he backed it up and rejoined at a parallel. Nicely done.
Yeah, we had a driver that unfortunately caused an accident for that very reason, kind of prone across the racing line, unfortunately. So this is David Glenn. I wonder if that's a hardware failure because I don't see anybody that actually hit him.
You know, when I went back and looked at it, I'm going to agree with you. It was just kind of drifting off to the right side and then drifting off to the left side. And in the real world, we have mechanical failures all the time. Well, guess what? It happens to the PC, too.
Yeah, unfortunate for sure. but it's just the nature of the beast with racing. It happens sometimes as we continue to watch McKinney give chase. He's, as you said, he's a half second back, but he's not completely far back. That said, Dirksen looks really fast here. I mean, he's already caught, and now he's applying pressure to the 527 car.
Yeah, spot on, right? And we're going to get another shot of David Glenn here. Let's see if we can watch the steering wheel on the back straightaway here. See if there's anything that kind of happens. And this was the other thing that I was noticing, a little bit of internet connection issue. And yeah, as you see, just the steering wheel doesn't have any life in it. That just screams disconnect to me.
It's such a shame. Ooh, we got a good run from McKinney here. He had a great exit coming out of Moss. Gibson, will he defend? No, he's leaving the door open. There's a little look from Michael, but he's not close enough to get side by side. Still, he's gone from defense to attack very quickly. This is almost becoming a three-car battle for the lead.
I wonder if Michael was maybe taking the tire warm-up a little bit slower and more gradual. Remember, we've only been racing for 5 laps here, 5.5 minutes so far, and that's not a very long time. In reality, these tires should just now be up to temperature, up to pressure. So if you kind of took it nice and easy for those few laps, that could have been the gap that we were seeing too.
And I've seen some blinking from Dirksen there in the 505, and I think I just heard Race Control give him a message to watch out for his connection. They do penalize drivers if they blink too much because they don't want that to be an issue out on the track. So here's crossing fingers that stabilizes for him. And look at Velez now. Velez and Leon both making it a 5-car train, all for the lead.
5 cars and then a very, very small gap to another pack of a couple cars. And I tell you what, David Snelling definitely went for a ride in that lap 1 incident right there. I don't think that anybody could have predicted multiple cars coming back across the racetrack like he saw.
Yeah, the Van Halen inspired machine partied a little too hard, unfortunately, and that's not it. He is back out on track. Remember, they have that spare cars, like Joey just mentioned, so he's just running in 28th a lap down. So not really going to be seeing much in the way of good results. We expected attrition to be huge yesterday. I don't know if that'll change for today based on what we saw here at the start, but very few retirements last night. So he might not have as big of a hope as he thought about gaining just by staying out.
Difficult racetrack to pass on, and when that is, it tends to be just kind of a rhythm racetrack. So if you have a nice practice rhythm out there, you can just go out there and click off laps. And to your point, if you're just clicking off laps and not making mistakes out there, it can be difficult to kind of climb out of any early holes. We're getting kind of our split screen right here, that 5-car battle for what is first place, and then a hugely long train sitting right here pretty much behind Michael Schultz, who just got by Ken Eskridge in that number 77. That's the battle for what is 6th.
Indeed, Ken back there in that 77 car, renowned NASA employee, works on the Artemis program, actually. So knows his way around this machinery, I'm sure, and is doing a good job holding on to that 7th position ahead of Tong, Green, and Foley, who continue to drive behind him. But things, I mean, speaking of the rhythm that you were talking about, things feel like they are settling into a rhythm. These trains are almost looking more like a stalemate now.
Yeah, and I'm looking at timing and scoring. I mean, our leader just set his fastest lap of the race, a 1:16.51. Well, guess what? Michael McKinney, your pole sitter, 1:16.3 directly behind there, a 1:16.4 from Dirksen. I mean, I could go on and on. Remember how close those qualifying times were? They're pretty much on top of each other in terms of the race pace as well.
Even Michael Schultz down in 6th position has a fastest lap of a 1:16.1. So, yeah, there's a lot of fast drivers behind him. I wonder how much of that is some of the slipstream helping here and giving drivers maybe a bit of a run if they've got a gap in front of them. In fact, speaking of which, McKinney gets a good one on Gibson once again. Last time, though, he didn't dare try and stick himself up the inside into turn 8, and he's going to do the same thing again and just stays sitting behind him. How long is that going to last before he gets some sort of opportunity and he pounces?
Remember when we were riding on board with this driver right here for that pole lap, that brake zone going into what is turn 8 off of the back straightaway. It's only down from 6th down to 5th, 1 gear, so it's not a huge deceleration zone. I feel like if you're going to make a move there, you really got to be on the bumper of your competitor, or at least alongside of them. Maybe even poke the nose out to the outside, kind of that long way around like you were mentioning earlier.
We'll get to ride on board with McKinney for a bit, see what his very perspective is on his 3-screen setup. You can see the car up ahead, John Gibson, who stole that lead away early on. But like I said, last time out, our winner got passed on the first lap. They saved fuel the entire first stint, came out multiple seconds earlier with a quicker pit stop. And, Derek Dirksen was just given a black flag because of his internet connection. It did not fix itself, so he is being forced to come in.
I was kind of wondering when that was going to happen. A shame for Derek there, who's sitting in the 3rd place, just out of shot here, but completely understandable if you're on the competition side of things. You know, what happens if your competitor that you're trying to pass or trying to defend from is constantly blinking out? It's a difficult situation, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's almost, we talk about sim racing comparisons, it is kind of the mechanical black flag for drivers in this series, just because it's considered unsafe around everybody else in the sim world. Meanwhile, battle for P3. Ben Leung inherits it back, but for how long? Here comes Julian Velez, forcing him to take a defensive line down into Quebec.
Right in the middle of the racetrack there, and I tell you what, that driver that you just mentioned about a lap and a half ago, Michael Schultz, is a rocket ship right now. So with these two battling, and they're probably going to be defensive here into Moss Corner as well, it was 2 cars fighting for 3rd. Well, guess what? Michael Schultz just arrived on the scene as well.
Getting a little bit exciting back here. That gap gives a chance for McKinney to focus forward instead of having to watch those cars behind. You could see the gap that has left between P2 and P3. So Ben Leung now leading his own personal train with Velez and Schultz tightly in tow. Coming up to turn 8. No chance here from Michael Schultz, who's also going to give us a nice view. Look at I like the model on his wall. Pretty cool.
That 11. You know, that's a Lego model, Joe. That's one of those Lego Technic models. So you can go out there and build one yourself too.
Yeah, my young nephew is extremely into Lego models. He's not getting into the Technic stuff as much, but for an 8-year-old, he's definitely putting them together a lot quicker than I think most adults can.
What I'm impressed by with that onboard from Schultz there is he's got the force feedback cranked into that thing. You see the forearms, they were pretty much flexed the entire time, and I know that when I'm trying to compete in the sim, that's exactly what I have to do too. You got to crank the force feedback so that way you can feel everything that the sim is providing you in terms of that information. And I don't know about you, but I also crank all the audio stuff because in the real world car, you can feel everything. Here in iRacing, it's down to those audio cues.
Oh, absolutely is. Are you sure you're not just trying to show off, just flex those muscles?
Hey, man, take some pre-workout, too, while you're at it.
Yeah. Well, it's a workout for John Gibson because his mind has probably been a little bit filled with Michael McKinney behind him. Each and every time they come up to turn 8, Michael's getting almost uncomfortably close to that 911 car. Just hasn't really been able to make a very real attack yet. But like I keep saying, something's got to happen eventually as we check back in with another one of our onboards, David Glenn, with his now kind of infamous Stormtrooper that he has in his sim rig.
I love it. I think that this is a fantastic man cave cubby, if you will. The one thing that would scare me, though, Joe, is you take off that virtual reality after you've been racing for an hour and a half, and there's a Stormtrooper sitting right there. It would probably take me back a couple times.
I can imagine if the power goes out and he takes that off. That's got to be a little eerie. Ooh,
just watch out for the lasers.
Yeah, really. This is a lot closer. And Michael McKinney was right up the tailpipe of John Gibson this time. Is that going to make the difference by the time they reach the end of the Mario Andretti Straight? That multicolored Porsche leading the way. Will it be there by the time they exit the corner? It looks like he will, but that was a much more aggressive move there from the 527, staying all the way to the inside.
Gibson, our leader, was pretty generous on that corner entry and actually, had a little bit of a slip up. Too much speed through turn number 10 allows Michael McKinney to close it back in on the front half of the racetrack. I really thought that Michael was fastest going up into Moss and then accelerating out of that corner down the straightaway these past couple laps. But if he is right on the bumper here and call it sector 1 going into sector 2, this could be another great opportunity down that straight.
He's got to capitalize here. Needs to stay as close as he can through this section, really get himself off of the Moss hairpin, that double apex right-hander. This is what he's coming up to now. Breaking into fourth, sends a lot of speed into the corner, but he needs to focus on the exit. Actually makes contact coming off, and that has hampered him. He is not going to get the launch he needs.
100%. You saw it, just too much rolling speed. I wasn't sure if he was trying to go up there and give a little bit of a hello to our leader, but it kind of compromised his exit. And there you see still about, call it 2.5 car lengths behind by the time we hit that brake zone this time around. So what was much closer the previous couple laps, Michael McKinney's got to close it back in. And I tell you what, those 3 cars are getting bigger in the mirror as well.
Well, let's add another interesting twist to this tale. I keep referencing the pass on lap 1 in the pro class. Well, in this class, it happened in turn 1. On lap 1 and for the pros, it happened in Moss hairpin, and it was because the leader left the door open in the middle of the corner, and second place just dove it in there. Again, I'm sure it seems like McKinney and Gibson have been taking notes on that race, and I have to imagine that McKinney knows that if he's quicker through the middle of that hairpin, there's a possible opportunity.
Well, and how long do you sit behind them, right? Because, yes, they're making good lap times, but with those last couple, with them kind of arguing down the back straightaway, it's actually been Ben, Michael, and Julian that have closed it in. So how many more times do you do that without actually making the pass, without having the threat from behind? Because remember, if you open that door when those cars are right on your bumper, it's a whole different ball game.
Let's see if anything happens this time, and I don't think so because, again, he didn't seem as close, and no, he's not there. So we'll take the opportunity to mention Princess Cruises. They are the 2025 PCA title sponsor, and as the official cruise vacation partner of Series 13, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 16 elegant ships, sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA Concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 833-679-2188. So, not as close as we saw a couple laps ago here between these two, but still sticking with it. And like you said, Leon Schultz back there just kind of giving watch, making sure they can't battle too much. So how long will they wait? Will they be able to push and maybe leave them behind?
Well, and I actually want to correct you just slightly because Michael Schultz has gotten around Julian. So Michael has moved up into P4. And remember, he got by Ken Eskridge earlier. He's up +6 positions, and he still is one of the fastest cars on the racetrack. Keep an eye on that number 97. That's the white car with the red highlights.
Interesting. Yeah, that's it's not easy to pass here. So 6 positions up in the first 14 laps is a pretty good feat there. Not our hardest charger, worth noting. Mike Matson has gained 13 from the beginning of this race. He was the one that did not set a time, so he did get out there, and boy, he picked up some good spots here early on. We're only a quarter of the way, actually about a third of the way into this race as we check back in on Ken Eskridge over Terrence Tong.
So Terrence is that bright pink machine applying the pressure to Ken Eskridge here in the white and black as we've got our battle for the lead on top here. And this has been a pretty good one. I kind of think of Ken Eskridge here in this number 77 as that immovable rock, right? Sometimes you run your pace and you have to make everybody else go around, and he's doing a great job staying mistake-free right now.
Yeah, Ken unfortunately wasn't mistake-free back at Portimao, but he had a fantastic run to the podium at Daytona and wound up finishing third. So I think he's maybe trying to pull a little bit more from that than from race number 2 here, and so far doing a decent job. The lead is actually making contact coming down the straightaway. McKinney was almost bump drafting Gibson up into turn 8 this time.
I think he actually did give him a little bit of a hello wave to that bumper on the back straightaway. Gibson was full defensive all the way driver's right down that Mario Andretti straightaway and kind of took away that inside move that Michael McKinney was looking for. So instead of kind of challenging him around the outside, he just kind of gave him a little bit of nudge and said, hey, okay, if you're going to be over here, I see you. We'll get something next lap.
And now within 0.3 of a second of Michael McKinney. On top of that, Schultz following in. The 4-car train reforms once again. It's been back and forth up here at the front where they separate, and then suddenly something seems to happen, and everybody compresses together once again.
So our last lap time out of our leader was a 1:16.6, and his fastest is a 1:16.3. Unfortunately, everybody behind him fastest 1:16.2, 1:16.1, 1:16.1, 1:16.1. So we see Steinbrink have an issue out of what was turn number 2. Unfortunately, collected somebody else with them. That was a big-time accident in a fast area.
Yeah, he actually was given a penalty for collecting that other driver, unfortunately, but it's a bit of a moot point because he's been stuck in pit lane since then, getting repairs done. No change of position this time down the back straightaway, but still very tightly packed together. We haven't had anybody, for those curious, that have pit yet. We've just pretty much gotten into the opening of the pit window about at the 43 minutes to go mark. But we're not expecting drivers to come in until probably about halfway. There was a big lunge from McKinney, and he's going to be able to stay side by side briefly through turn 3, but has to back out of it. Now he's starting to actually take action.
I think it was Dirksen that we saw made that move into turn 3 earlier and was successful. That one kind of took me by surprise, especially kind of an attempted pass for the lead in such a small little area, but he kind of did what he needed to do, got Gibson off of the racing line, off of the rhythm, and Joe, he's as close as he's ever been down the straightaway.
Immediately off to the right-hand side for Gibson, not wanting to give that inside run down into turn 8, forces him to go around the outside, but no battle this time coming into the S's. He'll back out of it, not willing to risk it. He's still got a lot of race left to go, and he's starting to get him onto the ropes a bit.
This time it was a little bit of a slip up on the exit out of 10 for Michael McKinney, our second place car, and that allowed Leung and also Schultz to kind of close it in. So John Gibson out front right now can maybe take a sigh, just a breath or two, focus out the windshield and forget everything in the mirror.
Ben Leung's not letting McKinney forget everything because he was right on top of him. Meanwhile, Patrick Adamczyk, it looks like, was the one that made contact, and Patrick already had a penalty of his own earlier, and he gets a little bit of an unfortunate penalty just by being in the wrong place at the wrong time. He has since been stuck in pit lane taking repairs of his own.
So the run out onto the back straightaway, unfortunately, I think that everybody is almost kind of at that, what I call a stiff arm lane, right? About 2, 3, maybe even 4 car lengths away. So they'll be able to accordion compress here using the slipstream, but nobody's quite close enough to make a big-time lunge into any one of these brake zones. So it's just about rolling that speed through these incredibly fast corners, get on the brakes right here, and just flow that rhythm through each one of these flowing corners here at Mosport. And if anything, it's Julian. Check this out, the yellow car trying to make a move on Michael Schultz. Michael takes it deep into turn number 1, is able to defend from it.
I feel like Julian's been a bit of a dark horse in all of this because he's been hovering back there. And yes, we saw him get overtaken earlier on in the race, but he's never lost touch with them. So I kind of wonder if he is someone who's just letting the race come to him, if he is saving either fuel or tires and waiting for something to happen in front of him before he makes a move.
Well, and if you're saving fuel, he's in the best position, right? You got 4 cars directly in front of you to call it to draft off of. And so if you're looking to save fuel and not create any waves, yeah, he is technically in the best position. let these other cars punch that big old hole in the air down these long straightaways and start to lift off of it at the end. And hopefully your pit stop time will be that little bit shorter when it comes time.
Exactly. And we did see some drivers manage to get pretty far into the stint here. I think there was one driver that managed to get to about 15 minutes left to go, but that was the longest anybody was able to do. Terrence Tong, back in 6, is right on top of Julian Velez. No, excuse me, that's Dale Green just behind him, rather. Battle for 6th position. So watch them come through turn 1 and up over the scary blind Clayton corner.
I love it. I've gotten the very fortunate opportunity to go to Motorsport a few times, race on it a handful of times, and this racetrack is just, it's so much fun. It's so fast, and it doesn't matter if you're looking at turn number 1 or turn number 2 like you were highlighting, even this section going down into Moss Corner. And you got to remember that this is still that old Scan. It's not the new super smooth Motorsport, so this is the fun, aggressive one.
We might want to replay. We didn't see it on screen, but Velez and Schultz just made contact. You could see they've lost ground, and it didn't create an accident, but it definitely cost them as Michael had to gather the car up coming off of the hairpin. No change up here for our top 3, but that could have been critical if they have now lost the draft of that podium group up there.
And the draft here in the sim is about, call it 1.1 seconds, maybe up to 1.2, 1.3 seconds. And here's that replay. You see Julian just give a smack there to Michael Schultz in the rear bumper. Gets them all sorts out of shape. And you're right, definitely just kind of halted the momentum. And that created a now 1.8 second gap.
By the way, I'm glad you brought up the unpaved exit of Clayton there in this scan. Did you race on both the paved and unpaved version?
I did not get to race the new super smooth version. I've only got to race this version of Motorsport.
I can only imagine how terrifying that must be coming out of that corner, knowing it's just grass and then off into the tires.
I got to race in it in mixed conditions too, Joe. It was a handful for sure.
I can just imagine. It is Michael McKinney who's imagining to lead this race if he could get back to where he started it. Remember, this is our pole sitter we're on board with right now, but has been just absolutely stuck behind the 911. And it's not for lack of wanting. He clearly has been looking and trying, but just has been unable to do anything with it. By the way, behind them, I think we got a battle starting to happen between Schultz and Velez once again, as they've gone side by side through the final corner. You could see him in the background there for P4.
They actually just banged wheels coming out of turn number 10. Here they are. So Julian in the yellow car, driver's right, and Michael Schultz trying to keep the throttle down. Let me tell you, they had a little bit of a mistake, and I'm talking about Michael Schultz, the white and red car, through Moss Corner for 2 laps in a row. This previous lap, Michael got out onto the grass all by himself. That's really what kind of invited Julian back into that 4th place position, and ever since they've been dueling, and here's Terrence Tong right on the bumper as well.
Was unable to get that pass done in the end as we watch them come up through the hairpin. Yeah, look at Tong in that bright pink Roxy car. He's managed to hunt them down. Could he make a difference if they start going wheel to wheel once again? They've also got Dale Green back there in the number 250.
Michael McKinney is going to go the long way around. Let's see if he challenges. He's trying to keep the nose in the clean air. He's right there, bumper to bumper. Is he going to give space? Gibson left him enough room, but hangs on to the lead. That was the first real attempt that we've seen out of Michael McKinney, and that was the long way around to 8.
Love what I'm seeing, though. Just enough space given by Gibson. McKinney didn't ask for any more than that. Fair by both of them, but very hard racing. This is going to come down to inches, I imagine, between them. They're having to look for the tiniest of openings.
Let's see about this rhythm through this bumpy turn number 3. Everybody gets the throttle down very, very nicely. So remember, that pass was done on lap number 1, turn number 1 from John Gibson here in this number 911. And He's been able to do a good job managing the lead so far, but we're just now approaching halfway, and Michael McKinney has been one tough customer. He says he wants that clean air back.
He's still got to worry about what's in his mirrors, though. The 290, just hovering and watching. Ben Leon there in that car with the Brumos livery on it, the red, white, and blue. Maybe going to try and snatch something up here. Not this time, though, as something's happened to Peter Kummer. Out of the final turn. Does he keep it out of the wall? Barely. And, yeah, nicely done. He's able to carry on for another day.
Catch back up with our leaders here. This is actually a decent little gap that Gibson's got himself. It really is now that top 3 breakaway ever since that Julian and Michael Schultz were kind of battling it out. It is now expanded up to 3 seconds between 3rd and 4th. And actually here, this is another problem from Michael Schultz. That was wide through turn number 2. He already gives up 1 position. And here comes Terrence. He's going to be looking around the outside here in this pink machine. Michael's going to hang on to it for now. But a couple big mistakes from Schultz here in the last handful of laps.
Yeah, we've been seeing cracks in that armor, and that's what's cost him. Granted, I wonder if some of the contact that he had just upset the balance of the car a bit. He was hit in the rear, so maybe some of the downforce is gone out of there. While we wait to see what happens with his car, we do once again want to mention that Princess Cruises is the 2025 PCA title sponsor. As the official cruise vacation partner of Series 13, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 16 elegant ships sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA Concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 883-679-2188. This is the battle for 5th that we've been watching now that Velez has managed to sneak through back into 4th. Schultz, who was on a charge earlier, seems to be unable to keep the pace lately.
And it's a bit of a shame. I really did think that Michael was probably the fastest car in the first 30 minutes, but those mistakes, it just grew that lead. And kind of to your point as well, remember Julian was a little bit of a dark horse that was just sitting there in the 5th place position. So it's kind of dropped him out of this podium fight too. But now that they're single file, I actually wonder if they can kind of close it back in. And if anything, I think the change in this landscape is actually that 3rd place car that we're focusing on right now. I think that Leung has gotten a little bit faster as these laps have gone on.
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely looking like that car is come to the fore lately. So as we watch him up into turn 8, is he going to change the complexion of this battle? Is he going to be able to try and get his nose in on the 527, force him to have to fight a rear guard? Marc Rondeau, rear of the car, did not want to try and grip up. He hits the wall on the inside of turn 2.
I think that was down at turn number 4 is where Rondeau had that issue right there. I could be wrong, though. I mean, this is still
right.
Watching him. So usually what happens is right here, you have to lift off of the gas and get on the brakes, but the car is still really loaded up on that right side. So if you actually lift off too soon, it can kind of hook you driver's left, which is kind of what we saw.
Right, as we come back to that battle for the lead. By the way, Velez back by about 2.5 seconds. So yes, he has dropped off, but honestly not as much as I would have anticipated. And frankly, if I'm seeing this correctly, no, he wasn't the fastest lap of the race, but personal best fastest lap for Velez last time by at a 1:16.0. So he was being held up. Yeah, I'd wager that he was indeed kind of just holding back a little bit while he was sat at the back of that train.
I'm going to expand on it. I think that him and Michael Schultz are still potentially the 2 fastest cars on the racetrack, but they went at it. I mean, and not for just 1 lap, but a few laps that they went at it, banging fenders, banging bumpers back there. And so they kind of have to look at themselves for that 3-second gap out there. But hey, that's part of racing.
Another 0.2 quicker than 3rd place that time once again. Rex Jarrawala, the latest to be a victim of Clayton Corner. He manages to nose down to the inside as well. Looks like he'll find himself a little bit of an opening before he carries on. He's a driver who likes to play tennis. Oh, but Adam Chick, unfortunately, no, he kept it out of the fence. The new grass model for iRacing coming to his rescue a little bit and causing the car to be able to slow up in time.
So out onto the back straightaway here. McKinney's actually pretty close to our leader. Let's see if he makes another aggressive move out to the outside. I think that Gibson's been doing a really good job just holding the car right in the middle of the racetrack. And there you go. See him again smack in the middle of the racetrack, forcing McKinney to go either all the way down to the inside or all the way to the outside. Sometimes it's just those little bits of movement and placing your car in the right spot to kind of dissuade that competitor from trying anything dumb, if you will.
And we're down to 25 minutes left to go. This is where we expect to see more drivers pitting in, checking, and it looks like Peter Sigourney and Rex Jarrawala and maybe Robert Cottle as well have all had scheduled stops, and I think Mark Rondeau just hopped in to do so. A big mistake from Gibson, and he's out. Gibson hits the wall coming out of 2 and almost gets hit by oncoming traffic. Everybody's heads up in this situation. Oh, it had been almost a flawless race up to that point for the 911 car, and that just almost came out of nowhere.
We've seen several of these cars get really, really loose. I don't think we've seen anybody kind of understeer off of the racetrack yet, and this was a similar type of spin. Here's the replay. So watch this lead car here, and just, you know what? You saw the big wiggle on corner exit there, and then it transitioned into a tank slapper, and unfortunately Gibson couldn't correct it before that concrete wall met it.
Credit to all the cars that came up to him. They had the chance to at least see him and try to avoid, because he was right on the racing line down on the entry to 3. That sends him to 15th. The good news is for Gibson is he has that spare car. So if he pits right now, he can use that, and he won't be hurting too badly if the damage has affected the handling or the speed of his machine. But he will not be returning in the top spot, unfortunately.
I think what you're talking about is a really good call. Pit window is definitely open. Here's another replay from right behind the leader. There's the wiggle, and then off into the grass. Honestly, a great job from McKinney to realize that he was already slowing down. I'm talking about Gibson directly in front of him, and Michael just put the foot to the floor and simply drove around it.
Yeah, gotta imagine that's a little mini heart attack for Michael McKinney seeing that car, just hoping it does not whip back onto the track into his side. As here he is, and now Ben Leung has one less driver to try and pass if he wants the lead. And you seem to think he's on the charge here. Let's see if he can make that come true and maybe take the top spot away from the 527.
I think what my brain is most curious about right now is the clean air for this driver right here in the 527. Michael McKinney, remember, he was your fastest car and driver in qualifying. He was your pole sitter, but he's been behind a car every single lap of today's race. Let's see what this one is, a 1:16.245, and guess what? That's right on top of his fastest lap of the day.
It's been an up and down season for John Gibson. Had a horrible result at Daytona, came home with a second place at Portimao, and now he's probably looking at no better than somewhere around 15th or so, unless he has an incredible second half of this race that he can make up the lost time. But McKinney now has an open goal. The question is, can he grab it with both hands from here as we come up into the Moss hairpin once again? We're still waiting for the top 14 cars all to pit in, so everybody kind of looking like they're on a very similar page here in terms of pit strategy.
And what my racing brain has kind of transitioned to is it looks like we're going to get a replay from Kellen Heimbachgar out here. Another little loose moment coming out at turn number 2, just like we saw out of our previous leader, but Kellen was able to kind of hang on to that one as this fight for, I believe, a little bit further down. This is actually the fight for what is 9th place on the racetrack is what we were watching right there. But the other thing that kind of ticks my racing nerd strategy brain out here is, are we going to see any shuffle when it comes to that fuel fill time? There's several cars that are packed incredibly close together that even just half second could change that position in pit lane.
Exactly, and we're seeing a variance from about 13 seconds to 16 seconds, which it does coincide with what we witnessed in the pro race last night. That does seem accurate. As we've still got that battle for P3. Velez ahead of Schultz, but Michael's done a good job collecting himself and getting back into the hunt. He was right up the tailpipe of the 33 for a little while, but seems to have dropped back now.
And I don't want these drivers to take it the wrong way. I still am a firm believer that on the bottom of the screen, this yellow car and the white and red car are the two fastest cars and drivers on the racetrack. It's just that they're a little bit mistake prone every so often, right? It's not every single lap, but maybe every 4 or 5 laps, there's one mistake out of it, and it just kind of halts their progression towards the front. Because I look at the fastest laps that have been laid down. These two cars battling for what is 4th place and 3rd place are the two fastest cars. They're the only cars 1:16 sub.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I checked the lap times before this current lap that they're just setting now. It was a 16.8 for Velez, which is about good 6 or 7 tenths off of his typical lap time. So, yeah, he must have been the one that had a problem out there and cost himself. That's why we've got Schultz back up on him, and also why Julian's no longer looking like he's closing in, at least for the time being, on these top two. McKinney finally gets himself some breathing space. This is the farthest we've seen him away from Ben Leung for many laps now.
I actually wonder if maybe it was just a little bit of lap traffic that came into play. Michael's been doing an incredible job to stay consistent ever since he got that lead, but it's not like he is just setting the track on fire. That last lap was a 1:16.5, so call it a moderately fast pace. Don't get me wrong, it's still incredibly fast to lap around Mosport in the 1:16s in this car, but there's plenty of cars that are faster. He's just staying consistent, hitting every single brake zone, every single mark, and he's starting to kind of pull out that lead a little bit.
They do have some lap traffic in front of them, but it's going to be, I think, a few laps before they get there. Ironically, the next one up is John Gibson, but that's because he took his pit stop already. So they're unlikely to lap Gibson since we're still owed a pit stop by our top drivers. Speaking of which, I just saw Dale Gibson flash by us on pit lane. So the 250, and it looks like now Kellen Heimbucher is also in. As we watch on board Ben Leung continue to just trail behind Michael McKinney. For a brief while, he looked pretty quick, but that pink car is getting a little bit smaller in the windscreen.
I'm happy that you had brought up Gibson's already hit pit lane, because it kind of gives me a rough data point. You know, we were still waiting on the top 10 to come down and hit pit road and fill up with fuel, but Gibson took 15.4 seconds worth of fuel, and he lost a ton of track position in that spin as well. But we'll just have to pay attention to these leaders once they finally hit pit lane.
Chris Sherburne, I know some of this is due to the pit stops. He's up 18, started 28th in this one. We'll see where he shuffles out. So he could wind up with quite a few spots, as they're not going to pit this time by. So yeah, they are being very fuel efficient tonight with our club class cars. It's as behind them. Yeah, that seems more like what I expected. Velez is in, Schultz is in, Foley. Ken Eskridge able to squeeze out one more lap as he carries on.
Let's see kind of the race on pit lane here. Like I said, it's about 15 seconds is what these cars are going to be stationary for. And is Julian going to be able to escape out of pit road? That yellow car in the lead here, at least of this pack. Remember, he came in directly in front of Schultz, and actually I think it's Michael Schultz that's got the longer stop out of everybody.
Interesting. Yeah, it's 16.3 with Velez at 14.9, so about a little more than a second faster for Julian Velez, which will get him easily out of range of the 97 car. So hopefully shouldn't be under attack for too much longer. Back up to our leaders. Okay, pretty sure they should come in, but we'll see if they were very frugal here today as the 527 comes through turn 9 up to turn 10. And yep, he is pitting in. So is Ben Leung.
And this makes sense, right? If you're kind of, call it the fastest cars on the racetrack, you want to extract every single little bit of fuel out that you can. Make that car as light as possible, aka as fast as possible, and then finally come down and get your fuel in the car. Remember, any extra fuel at the end of it is just extra weight that you're toting along.
I shouldn't be surprised that Ken Eskridge is going the longest. He tends to do this. I'm sure there's a joke to be made there about a NASA engineer being able to do all the right calculations on this one. As Ben Leung out ahead of Michael McKinney. So a change in position, just like we saw last night, with Ben having a shorter stop by almost 2 seconds.
So could this have been down to the fuel save? Now, Michael McKinney was not in the lead that entire first 45 minutes. He was chasing John Gibson, call it the first half hour of this race. So I was thinking that maybe he was saving a little bit of fuel, but seems like Ben Leung was able to save even more fuel, 2 seconds shorter on pit lane.
Well, if you like to save, you might want to check out our sponsor, Princess Cruises. They're the 2025 PCA title sponsor. As the official cruise vacation partner of Series 13, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 16 elegant ships, sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA Concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 833-679-2188. So the final quarter of this race now, and it's starting to rhyme a little bit, shall we say, with what we witnessed last night. If that is the case, then Ben Leung has good hopes to try and go on to the finish. Okay, so we were watching a replay, excuse me. Thought we had another swap there on pit exit. It was close. It was close, but, you know, track position important here, and Ben Leung knew it. He got it.
Hey, this has got to be a little bit of a frustrating race for Michael McKinney, right? Because he was your pole sitter. He started today's race from P1, but didn't even make it to the first corner before getting overtaken by another competitor, and then did a great job to just kind of be the fly at the barbecue. Was annoying enough to force Gibson into the mistake. He thought, okay, the race is mine, here we go. And then all of a sudden, this 290 Brumos machine, Ben Leung, executes a perfect strategy.
Also, remember we mentioned Velez was quicker than Schultz in gain time. That meant he was also quicker than McKinney. That's down to 1.5 seconds. So I don't think Michael's woes are necessarily over. If Julian shows the pace we saw early in this race, he could get up there and maybe vie for second. I don't know. What do you still think he could be quickest and chase down the leader?
Let's see here. We've got, call it 13 minutes left. He's only 1.3 seconds back. Yeah, I definitely think so. Remember, his fastest lap of 1:15.8, but Julian just needs to limit those mistakes. We've seen he can be the fastest car. It's just, can you be the fastest car for the remaining 13 minutes?
So now that we've seen everybody kind of work their way through their strategy, we've got a better look at who's been a hard charger. Chris Sherburne has the most positions gained at 15, starting in 28th, but Madsen up 14 is just 2 positions behind him. So both of them have been doing a fantastic job coming up from the back of the field with, I'm guessing, was maybe a bit of a poor qualifying on both their parts because they seem slightly out of position.
I see, I just kind of want to stay on that subject. I see Richard Woodruff as well as Steve Comax as well. They're both double digits in those positions gained. So I would say a handful of drivers out here, even Terrence Tong, plus 9 positions to find himself in 5th. As you know, the further you go forward, the more difficult those passes get.
The 14 with a good run on Woodruff. He's going to take away one of those positions. If he is able to slam the door shut, he'll have the inside down into turn 8. Are they going to stay wheel to wheel? Nope. Richards not able to hold on, although he's going to hold on that outside. And now the door is firmly slammed in his face.
I can't help but to think of my buddy Chris Buescher every time I see Kellen's name out here. I want to say Buescher, but it's Heimbucher.
Yeah, exactly. And Kellen currently up 4 himself, so not too bad of a day. And is that 4th position? No, that's a lapped car in front of them. So that's Patrick Adamczyk, who doesn't want any more trouble in this race, probably wants it to be over with. He's the last car running right now, actually, in 26. We've only had 3 retirements.
Nicely done out of the field at 29. Yeah, still see 26 cars still lapping out there on the racetrack. Always what you like to see, whenever I'm part of these league races, that fast repair. Everybody's kind of mixed on it, right? But I think of it as a lifeline. It's always nice to get back there out there on the playground if you make your own mistake.
You often bring up the autocross line sometimes. Kylan Heimbucher, I was checking on some of his background here. He actually races in autocross, so I wonder if that's been helping him today.
Well, one of the big-time names in road racing that's followed a lot on socials nowadays is Randy Pobst. I've gotten the fortunate opportunity to race Daytona with Randy in the 24, and he was a big-time autocrosser before he even started road racing. So he's one of these teachers that will definitely preach you that autocross can definitely teach you some stuff.
I can imagine Terrence Tong, though, is trying to teach Dale Green where his place is, because Dale's getting a bit close to the back end of that 388. Terrence managing to climb 9 positions into a top 5 today, so an excellent race from him.
Terrence has kind of just been that Mr. Consistency here in this pink 388. Like we've said, up 9 positions so far, and he was actually right on the back of Schultz and Julian there for a while. He's had the pressure from Dale Green in his mirror for the most part, so it has not been an easy race for Terrence, and he's doing a terrific job hanging out inside the top 5.
We may have had another problem. No pass there heading into turn 8, but Peter Sigourney suddenly has dropped down our tower quite a bit. So I think he may have had an issue back there. Terrence Tong, though, coming off of the final corner. Almost thought he was going to defend there coming down into turn 1. They'll stay on the racing line. Does look like Dale Green is just hassling him bit by bit wherever he can.
As we watch this battle, I just want to kind of point something out. Ben Leung, our leader, has set the Jets on right now. A 1:15.7 that last time by. 1.3 seconds out in front of Michael McKinney. Maybe he was the one that was actually the dark horse just waiting for his opportunity. And now that he's got it, he is throwing up the deuces.
May have seen that Green hails from Vancouver, so not quite a home track for him. But this is one of many Canadians here. Ben Leung, Derek Dirksen, Terrence Tong, also fellow Canadian, Patrick Adamczyk. So a bit of a mix of fortunes here on home soil.
Yeah, I was going to laugh a little bit. Vancouver, I'm pretty sure, is on the other side of the country.
Hence why I clarified.
I'm up here in Seattle, and I was like, oh, Vancouver's just up the road. As Peter Sigourney here went for a little bit of spin in Moss Corner. That's the 222 that you see there on the main screen. That's the tricky part right here. You can actually drive behind that concrete wall and find yourself stuck in the sim. Good thing he kept it on the racetrack.
Yeah, still frustrating, though, because I know he wanted to get going as quickly as he could and lost a lot of spots as he got that one turned around. Tong versus Green down through Quebec Corner. And just as it opens up, getting onto that throttle, and watch how the track is just going to disappear over this drop here down the hill and into Moss Hairpin. Interesting to note as well about this corner and why it's called the Moss Hairpin. The reason it has the double apex is because Sterling Moss was the one that looked at the plans for the track and said, hey, maybe you should try this instead, because it was going to be just one continuous corner before.
Oh, see, as a driver, I just think, well, you know what? It's slippery out there. There must be moss on it, Joe.
Yeah, I'm sure it feels like that, honestly, going in there sometimes with that way it levels off. It kind of has that tabletop there as you come through the corner. I will
say, as I interrupt you here, it does drive a little bit differently in the real world than it does here in the sim. It kind of tends to spit you out the top end at Moss Corner here on the sim. But in the real world, if you guys have actually driven it, which it sounds like a lot of Canadians here racing, you can actually kind of drive it almost like a bowl, like a half pipe, if you will. It feels pretty cool.
That is, now you have me intrigued as a skateboarder. Kind of want to get out there
totally.
and get to ride it at some point. David Glenn, where is he running at this stage, actually? He's in 22nd, it looks like. Yeah, he's lost quite a few today. He started in 6th. So not the day he was looking for, sadly.
You know, just seeing the Stormtrooper and all the helmets, it makes me think I got to get a giant stuffed animal doggo for my sim racing room to have in front of me.
Just not show off the actual dogs, a stuffed dog.
Hey, well, you know, the actual dogs are too wiggly. You know they're not going to stay on the screen. We watch this battle between Eskridge here and Foley as go down the Mario Andretti straightaway. I had mentioned that Ken's done a terrific job, really, to kind of be that immovable rock. He's got his pace that he's running, and he has done a terrific job not to fall down the order, making all these passes very, very difficult to anybody who comes up on that bumper.
Although he wasn't very fast coming off the final corner, and it looks like Foley was thinking about it for a brief moment, but it's hard to pass into turn one. That is another fast flowing turn that you don't see a lot of braking for, so he'll have to stay patient for at least a little bit longer. Ooh, and he gets a good one coming there out of Clayton. He'll take it into Quebec. Easy as you like. Eskridge doesn't fight it.
Nicely done from both of those drivers. Foley to make that lunge into turn number 3. That's a difficult passing opportunity, and now he solely focuses forward up into this corner that Terrence and Dale have still been duking it out at. And I've really been watching this 388, the pink car, through Moss Corner. He really likes to square off that second apex, and it just provides him this huge launch down the straight.
Guess the best defense is a good offense there. So, yeah, use that speed coming off the corner, and Tong will continue to stiff arm Dale Green each and every time they get up to turn 8, preventing him a chance to try and get by. And the laps are running out as well. It's not too few, because remember, it's about 1:15 around here. So with 4 and some change left, we're seeing probably around 3 or 4 laps to go.
This is a cool camera shot. Call it a fast-paced drone following them up over 1 and now 2. Let's see if there's any slip-up. Terrence, nice and early, tucked to the inside there as he went down the hill, and same type of driving line here in turn number 3. He's definitely focused forward. He's not allowing that number 250 to kind of affect him at all, and that's what you need to do. You almost need to kind of proverbial turn off those mirrors and ignore anything behind. Just hit your marks, and if you know that you can do that, you've got the pace to stay in front.
So far, he's been doing a really good job of that. And you could see the gap there as we get this long shot down the back straightaway. We got a glance of Michael Schultz ahead of him about 4 seconds up the road. So unfortunately, unlikely to run him down with as little time as they have left. Worth noting that Schultz is still within about 1.5 seconds of Velez, but Velez was not able to gather up our top 2. Rex Jarawala, oh no, and he finds the wall. It looks like coming out of turn 8.
Thankfully, just drop it into first gear right here, and if you still got that faster pair, pit entry is just maybe 100 yards down the road. Hopefully Rex was able to get that car fixed up and get back out there on the racetrack, as Terrence is still holding off Dale here down the turn number 2 and 3, and it seems like Rex was, that was a little bit of a nervous moment, pulling out in front of some traffic onto the racing line.
I don't know if they'll penalize him, but I'm pretty sure he'll at least get a warning from race control about an unsafe re-entry. Because, yeah, that looked just a tad sketchy there. Terrence Tong going to get car to lap. That is Robert Cottle, just going to stay out of the way. Remember, they have the new blue flag rules in Series 13 that once you get within 1 second of the car ahead, and that's why Rob is so far back. He goes for a bit of a trip, just glances the tires and keeps going.
That had me taken back for a little bit, because the other white car with the red highlights was Michael Schultz that's been kind of hanging out there in that 4th place position. So I was a little bit confused for a moment, as got about 2 minutes to go. This should be about 2 laps to go here for everybody.
I think you're right. And yeah, I kind of had the same reaction. I thought, did they already catch him? And no, just the lap traffic kind of stepping in the way for a brief moment. Terrence Tong going to try and give Roxy a podium finish, or excuse me, a top 5 finish rather. in today's race as we check in with the battle for ninth. Definitely glad we're going to give some love to the mid-pack. We've had so much action up front, we really haven't had a good chance to kind of see as much here with these drivers past the top 5.
This battle for ninth, down on the bottom of your screen, is Kellen versus Richard here. The number 14 car leading the way. That's that green and purple car with Richard in that 934, kind of another Brumos theme car, and actually a little bit wide there up through Moss Corner, but thankfully Kellen was able to get it back onto the racing line, shoot down that back straightaway with a good acceleration phase.
I just realized what Kellen's car reminds me of. Did you ever have the color-changing Hot Wheels as a kid that you dip in cold water?
Totally.
Yeah. Looks just like that. I don't know if that's intentional, but it brings back good memories, that's for sure. As we get the white flag for, our battle for 5th, but also for our leaders. Leung now 2 seconds ahead and looking very comfortable. That is not Michael McKinney behind him. That is a lapped car. So Ben Leung is sitting pretty.
And quite honestly, if you ask me, story of the race. You know, I've thrown out a lot of names. I've said Michael Schultz a lot today. I've seen Julian Velez just being an incredibly fast car out there. But Ben Leung just kind of hung out for the first 30, 45 minutes. And we saw as that opening trio kind of fell apart, Ben's just still stuck on the back bumper of Michael McKinney. And ever since that pit stop and he got that lead, he has not looked back.
It's clear that there is a little bit more underneath him, and poor Kellen here. We were just talking about the great race he was having, and commentator's curse strikes again as he spins and loses at least 2 more positions before being able to do the final lap of this race, which is coming to a close for Ben Leung. He is going to find his way to victory lane, the first one that is not Andy Jenks that is going to win here in Series 13 for the club class.
A great race from Ben, well managed, and even with that 14-second fill time was able to make it to the checkered flag. You see Michael McKinney cross the line in second place there, started the race up front, but did not get to lead very many laps today. And a nice run from Julian Velez in that yellow car, the number 33, rounding out the podium today.
A wonderful run from him. Chris Sherburne, by the way, we just saw across the start-finish line, 17 gained at the end of the day. He gets his qualifying sorted out. Clearly, he's got pretty good pace out there, especially at a track where traditionally you don't see a lot of overtakes. Looks like we'll wind up with roughly 19 of our 29 starters managing to finish on the lead lap here, which isn't too great of a surprise with such a short distance. But the first one across was, of course, the number 290 of Ben Leung as the last of them come across the line here. There's our finishing order unofficially, as Michael McKinney will wind up about 2.5 seconds off. He's going to have some head scratching after this one, no doubt. Julian Velez with a great podium in P3. Michael Schultz winds up behind him in 4th. Terrence Tong coming home in P5. Just ahead of Dale Green, who kept him honest the whole way in that 6th spot. Mark Foley, P7. Ken Eskridge finishing 8th today. Richard Woodruff, 20th to 9th. And then I mentioned on some of these cars, Steve Komatz winding up in 10th, up 12 positions.
And then is Chris Sherburne, like you were mentioning, the biggest gainer of today, plus 17 to finish in 11th. I recognize a Pacific Northwest driver when I see him. That's exactly where Chris is from. Kellen Heimbucher, remember, we watched him have that little lazy half spin with 1 lap to go. Unfortunately, it dropped him down to what is 12th place. Charlie Boyer finishing in 13th. Mike Matson back here in 14th. Peter Sigourney finishing in the 15th place position with John Gibson. Remember, he led the first 35, 40 minutes before having that self-spin out of turn number 2. Unfortunately, there drops him to 16th. Gary Rice in 17th. Rex Jarwala in 18th. Peter Coomer in 19th. And then Scott Bowers is the first car 1 lap down in 20th.
David Glenn will be 21st with Robert Cottle. His late race hiccup cost him, and he finishes 22nd. Derek Dirksen, 23rd for him. David Snelling in 24th. After that, it's Mark Doran in the 25th spot, and you finally get into the drivers who had a really rough time. Patrick Adamczyk, 26th, and a DNF for Rondeau Steinbrink and Neville all involved in some of the opening lap issues out there. Looks like we've got Ben ready to chat with us, so why don't we have a little talk with our winner and see how he feels about how this race went. Ben, congratulations on the win. You've come home with a strategy that looks somewhat familiar, considering we saw something pretty close to that happen last night with the Pro Class. Were you watching that race?
I watched bits and pieces of it, but yeah, I can't say I watched the whole race.
Well, the winner of that one also saved fuel and wound up coming away with the win. Is that what you were doing out there, hanging with the leaders? Were you just kind of saving some until the pit stops?
Yeah, I think that was my initial thought, because it's so hard to pass on this track. I was just following the leaders, and they were fighting it out, and I was just hanging back, trying to save as much fuel as I could, and see if I could shorten my pit stop.
Now, when you came out and it was almost exactly the same time as Michael McKinney, with how narrow that pit exit is, was there a moment of panic?
Yeah, I was, because when I started moving, he was still stopped, but then next thing I know, he was right beside me, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen once we crossed the cones.
Well, what happened was you took the lead and you never looked back from there. Definitely and easily your best finish of the season. Can you carry this momentum for the remaining races?
Well, I'll try, but this track I had a home track advantage. Driven here, in real life, thousands of laps, so that helps.
I can imagine it's a great help, as Joey was testifying to earlier. Congratulations again, Ben, and hopefully we'll get to chat with you more this season.
Oh, thank you so much, Joe.
Ben Leung, your winner today, followed home by Michael McKinney. Joey's caught up with him. Very curious to hear his thoughts on this race.
Yeah, well, first of all, Michael, congratulations on the second place finish here today at Mosport.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. It was a lot of fun.
Now, I got a couple of questions for you. What happened on the initial start there? It just didn't seem like you got a very good jump on that green flag.
Yeah, I don't know if I just got caught off guard a little bit, which what it felt like. I just, I was in first gear, and it just kind of lagged on me. So lucky to keep it where I did.
And then talk me through avoiding that spin from John Gibson directly in front of you out of turn number 2 there. That seemed like a pretty tense moment.
Yeah, I really feel bad for John. I don't know what happened there. All of a sudden his car let go, and I had enough space to get by him pretty cleanly. So I feel bad for him. We were having a lot of fun. I was hanging out behind him, and we were having fun racing. So, again, feel bad for him.
Well, and my last tough question for you was, did you regret not fuel saving maybe a little bit while you were behind Gibson? It seemed like that's how Ben actually made the pass, was just in pit lane a little bit less fuel than you.
No, I was saving fuel. I had a little bit too much in crew chief. That he topped me off a little too much. So that was my mistake, and it made it exciting going out of pit road. That's for sure.
Yes, you definitely made it very exciting going out of pit road. Michael, congratulations on the second place today, and great job today at Mosport.
Thanks, guys. You do a great job. I want to thank my wife, my family, Abby, Max, Imperial Motorsports teammates, and my coach, Sabra Cook. A lot of fun. Hope everybody has a great night.
That was Michael McKinney driving that number 527. Was your pole sitter coming home in second place here today, Joe?
And then behind them, we had Julian Velez trying to see if he could play catch up, especially because middle of the race, Julian, we noticed for a good chunk, you were the fastest car out there. Were you kind of hiding some of your pace early on, or what was going on?
No, I mean, this is definitely a very, very hard track to pass on, and kind of got scared going into that last corner, one of those beginning laps behind Ben there. Got a little scare from Mr. Schultz, but he gave me a run for my money tonight and kept me on my toes, and yeah, it was definitely quite the experience tonight.
It looked like it. That said, you still managed to both make passes on track and jump a few people in pit lane. So overall, are you satisfied with where you wound up, or because you were so fast in the middle, did you feel like there was maybe a bit more on the table?
Yeah, honestly, I I need to figure out how to not screw up my qualifying going forward, because I feel like that's my biggest detriment lately. I need to just be able to qualify up on podium and be able to run away from some of these guys. But yeah, I just try to keep it clean, consistent, and I try to keep it a 0x race. I think I ended up with 2 points. So overall, I'm happy. I'm glad this race is over, though, because this is definitely a very tricky track.
It can be stressful to drive. Well, talking of improving your qualifying, how do you usually fare at Silverstone? Is that a strong one for you?
It's been a few years. I do like it, but I'm pretty sure Silverstone is a rain race this year, and I am not too great in the rain, so I'm hoping that I could just keep it clean and keep it on track and hopefully finish up top and keep those points high.
Time to get those Wellingtons out, I suppose. Well, congratulations on a third place, and hopefully we will see you some more.
Thank you very much, everybody.
That was Julian Velez finishing in P3, which is going to wrap us up. And as we just teased, our next race for this club class is going to be at Silverstone on February 20th. So it should be fun to watch them at another very fast circuit, but with a little bit of a different nature to it for sure. A lot less elevation change. But we've got more racing here at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. Join us next Wednesday night, February 12th, because the sport class is going to be coming up next. But a big thank you goes to the steering committee at PCA Sim Racing, as well as to our team tonight, Ramiro and Joey. Thank you so much for watching tonight's broadcast of PCA Sim Racing. I'm Joe Peak, and until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.